Great. Well, we're glad to see y'all and happy Sunday night. Natasha is on her way home from St. George, so she'll be back next week with all sorts of wonderful, interesting things to share with us and all the wisdom. So you have two stand-ins. Harold and I are tag teaming it tonight. So, but we're excited to chat and yeah. It's going to be good. So I have two things that I had prepared to talk about tonight that specifically I've been talking with my athletes about the last couple of weeks. But Harold, did you want to jump in first and go, or do you want me to go first? Go? Okay. All right. So both of my things, I just want to start out by saying that both of the things that I'm going to talk to y'all about today are things that I don't do well. I have not done well. And so they have been things for me as an athlete that I've had to learn. And then walking through it with my own athletes, it's been super helpful for me coaching them and also me as an athlete. So we've done all these like big training blocks and you've put all this work in and your FTP has gone up and your heart rate's gone down and your paces have gone up and you feel great and you're injury free and you're ready for race day, right? But in between that ending rate, that training block and race day, we have this fun little zone that we call taper. And there's so many good things that happen in taper. And then there's so many things that can go terribly wrong in taper. And so I just wanted to touch on those because like I said, it's definitely an area that's been weakness for me. But when we do it right, we show up at that start line fresh and ready to go. And that's when you can really then utilize all that awesome fitness that you had put in for those weeks and months building up to whatever race you're working on. So, I mean, we're talking sprints, Olympics, half Ironman, full Ironman. There always needs to be some time that you are basically mini recovering and letting those muscles recover and do what they need to do so they're sharp for that start line. So I just wanted to kind of go over what that looks like and what we as coaches, what's going through our minds as we get you ready for that. So why do we taper? We taper to let all of that good fitness sink in and recover so that we're ready for the start line and we're ready to get going. And so what that usually looks like, depending on what your race is we're looking at 8 to 14 days of taper time, where things are changing in your training sessions. The great thing is you guys all have coaches, so we do all of this for you and we set all of that up for you. So if you follow what we've set for taper, then you're ready to go. But in our minds, the way that we set those tapers up is you will have your frequency of your workouts will not necessarily change. We're not all of a sudden going to have all these lazy days where you're taking days off and we're not having you work out. You will still have your frequency of workouts be the same. You will still have the days you do certain workouts be the same. But what it will look like is your intervals of hard work will be a little bit shorter during those workouts. Your rest periods will be a little bit longer during those workouts. And we're going to really focus on race pace efforts during the intense times. So if you're going for the half Ironman, then we're going to talk a lot about half marathon goal pace. We're going to talk a lot about the 2,100 yards or meters wherever you're swimming in the water, right? The 1.2 miles that you're swimming in the water, 1.4 miles you're swimming in the water. We're going to talk about the watts that you're putting out, the race pace watts you're putting out. And then same thing if we're looking at Ironman or even sprints or Olympics. So there's going to be a lot of dialing in of the paces for those specific workouts. So during taper, those 8 to 14 days before your race day, we as coaches need you communicating with us of how those efforts are feeling. Is this sustainable? Are these paces sustainable moving into race day? Because that is our gauge for getting you ready for what that race day looks like and executing it. So again, we're not taking days off. We're not completely resting, but we are extending the rest during the workouts and the intervals are super duper focused on race pace effort. So it takes a lot of discipline because what you will want to do is you'll want to start pushing that effort more because you're going to feel good. And so there's a lot of discipline required during taper. First though, the first couple days of taper are not always very fun. I get very cranky those first couple days of taper because you're pulling back more, your body is resting more, and you may start to feel a little bit antsy about your training and about what's coming up. You have more time during the recovery times to think about race, which then can make anxiety go up. So it's totally normal for those first couple days to feel a little bit funky on taper. But as you get going and you hit race week, you should start feeling really, really sharp, really focused. Those efforts should really start coming together. You will be tempted to push the efforts, especially the 3 to 4 days before race day. You're going to want to test it and see, can I really do it? Can I extend it? Do not. That is where you as the athlete need to really have that discipline to not test that fitness. Test it on race day. That's why we have it there. That's where you're going to be testing it, is executing it on race day. If you've done the training blocks we've put out for you and you're doing the taper that we've spelled out for you, it's going to be there when you hit the start line. So don't test that fitness. It definitely takes a lot of discipline for sure not to do it. But those couple of days, I'm sure, Harold, you're probably feeling it right now, right? Like, let me just push it, let me push it. But you can't, like, at that point, don't, like, save it in there. Let those muscles do what they need to do for race day. The other thing with taper is it's not just about your workouts. There's a lot going on in the whole person, the whole athlete that you will be experiencing during your taper time and ways to get ready for race day. The first thing is definitely diet. This is not the time to be experimenting with diet those days leading up to race day. Eat what you know your stomach can handle. Make sure that you're getting your carbs, your fat, and your proteins. This is not the time, oh, I'm less intensive, I need to start cutting calories. Do not mess with the diet at that point. No, do what you are used to and what you've already trained your body to do. Don't start surprising it with anything new, because it's a machine at that point. You just want to keep refilling it with the same thing that it knows it can handle. The other thing is getting your mind right. Like I said, you're going to have more recovery time, and this is when your brain is going to start trying to start second guessing some things. The anxiety levels are going to go up. There's going to be more conversation about the race. This is when you are thinking about the start line. You're thinking about what transition looks like. What is it going to feel like to cross the finish line? So really trying to train your mind onto the positive thoughts and pushing away those negative thoughts. You've done all this work. Don't start second guessing yourself or letting yourself get in that negative headspace now, because that's not where you want to show up on race day. Your body's ready. Make sure your mind is ready during taper as well. So getting that all right, figuring out what's your mantra going to be when you're on course. What's your swim technique? What are you focusing on the swim? What are you focusing on the bike? What are you be saying to yourself? What are you be saying to yourself on the run? Those are the things that you're going to be repeating during those days leading up to the start line. Also, this is a really good time during taper to test your gear. So you bought new goggles, that's great. Wear them a couple times in the pool to make sure they don't leak, right? Make sure your tri kit is fitting and it's good. Make sure you have enough of the chamois cream. Make sure you have enough Body Glide. You make sure that you're using that wetsuit for those last couple swims so that you're seeing where things are rubbing and where that needs to be done. You might have forgotten. So this is the time as you're laying things out to start packing them up. You're testing them, you're making sure you have enough. Do you have enough salts? Do you have enough of the gels that you're taking on course? Those days are when you are testing to make sure that everything you're using on course is completely set and ready for race day. And it's going to give you that peace of mind. So it all comes together. And the last thing is not overthinking it. Again, you're all paying coaches. So trust us that we know you're going to be ready and we know what you need to do to get there. Be resting, be recovering, be hydrating and eating and doing all the things that you can do on your end. And we've got you covered for the start. And so then at that point, all it takes is showing up on the start line, being ready to go in that good mental place and trusting the training that you've put in and trusting the rest that you've put in. And again, my athletes that are doing this are showing up and they are so excited and ready for race day because they've done everything they need to do to have the peace of mind at the start. So that was one of the things that I wanted to kind of go over today, just as we get ready for our last couple big races of the year. So, and then I had another thing, but Harold, do you want to go jump in and then I'll close up?
Sure. No, that was perfect. Spot on. And Katie hit the big kind of overall picture of what all of that should look like. If you're like me and you kind of want to dial into a little bit of specifics of what the day-to-day or what the block-to-block of what all of that looks like, there is data, there are numbers that we can go by. And the big overarching number is from your performance management chart, or you will see these numbers at the end of your week on your Trainingpeaks, right? And one of them is labeled training stress balance. That is your form, okay? Typically through your big blocks of training, that number is negative. It's a product of your fitness and your fatigue, okay? Your form is your race day readiness, essentially. And when you're in a big block of training, it should be negative, right? You want to bury that number down below 0 if you can. And that just means that your fitness is growing up, your fitness is going up, and you're getting prepared for the taper. So when you come to the taper and you decrease your volume, you keep the frequency in there, like Katie said, just to keep your legs sharp, to keep the blood flowing, to keep the metabolites, flushing through the blood and all of those things. Then you'll start to see that training stress balance number, or your form, you'll start to see it come up into a positive number, right? And that's ideal, especially the last week right before a race. And if you look at it at the beginning of your week, say on Monday, you look at that number at the end of the week, what it's doing is forecasting, okay? So if that number is positive 50, then what it is doing is saying that if you don't do any workouts for the remainder of this week, when you finish the week, you'll be at a training stress balance of 50. It's not accounting for the workouts that you're going to do that week, okay? So if you look at that number and you kind of freak out, you're like, oh man, I don't know, that may be too positive, like I'm losing fitness. Don't worry, the workouts that you're going to do during the week are going to bring that down a little bit. And a general number that you want to see in your training stress balance on race day, not the forecasting, but on race day, is you want it to be somewhere between 25 and 50. Okay. 50 may be a little bit too soft for some people. They need to go into a race with a little more sharpness in their legs. And there'll be other people who 25 is a little bit too sharp. They need a little more rest. They need to get their body recovered a little better before they can go and put down a big performance on race day. So it sounds like 25 to 50 is kind of a big range, but it really isn't that big, okay? So you can kind of measure that, or kind of watch the trend as you're going through your training block. When you're deep in it, man, and you've got those big weeks of training, your biggest weeks of training, you're going to see that number. And for most of it, it's going to be negative, right? And then as you go through your taper, you want to see that number slowly come up and turn positive. All right. That's one thing. The other thing is that Katie mentioned the nutrition the week of the taper, right? Getting your nutrition dialed in, making sure that you're staying on top of your meals. And there's a couple of pieces of advice there that I like to give people. And it kind of you have to take a couple steps back, because when you're in those big blocks of training, it's easy to be in a calorie deficit, right? Because you're training so much, it's hard to stay on top of the caloric needs that you have day to day. And it compounds, right? Really, it's week to week, all that stuff. It's kind of easy to be in a calorie deficit when you're training that hard, because you're expending so many calories on a daily basis, right? When you get to taper week and you bring that volume down, now it's going to become fairly easy to be in a calorie surplus, okay? So you've been eating a ton of food to try and keep up with the amount of training that you've been doing. Now we take some of that training away, and now it's easy to eat a little more food than what you need, put a couple pounds on the week right before a race, and that can leave you feeling kind of sluggish as well. So I don't want to say that a calorie surplus is bad during your taper week, because it may necessarily not be. It may be actually a good idea for a lot of us, but we want that, if it is a surplus, we want it to be small, maybe 200 calories a day, more than what you're expending. And you can kind of catch up from all the calorie deficit that you've been in through the big blocks of training, give your body the nourishment that it needs to recover and repair, and then show up on race day, not feeling sluggish because you've overate a little bit during the week, but feeling prepared. All the tissues are ready to go. And so that's another thing to be conscious of, is that I always have to think about that too, because when I'm going through big blocks of training, I'm eating everything. I'm always hungry. I can't even keep up with the amount of calories that I'm burning, still losing a little bit of weight. And then during the taper, I'm just like kind of bored, want to eat a lot of food. It's easy to put a couple pounds on. Be careful of that. Okay. But that's everything else Katie said right there was perfectly spot on. Very good.
Awesome. The other thing that I was going to cover that I'm also not great at, but I'm working on, and it goes right along with it. So you've done all the work, you've tapered well, you have a great race. Now what? Right. So we have this time in between that, getting ready for your next race and finishing this one. And that's when we're going to really look at recovery. And again, this is an area that I've really had to work on. And I've worked on with a lot of my athletes, and all of you are going to be coming through this as we're finishing the big races. And then with Natasha talking about what we're kind of calling like a preseason, off season, getting ready for 2023. You want to set yourself up for a solid base building season. You've got to get the recovery nailed down as well. And so there's just a couple things I wanted to touch on with that. First of all, like when you're immediately done, right? Like you finish the race, you cross the finish line, you're excited, you're cheering, it's awesome. Like that minute you step across the finish line is when recovery starts. Like it's right then. That is when you're going to start trying to get your body to recover from the massive stress that you just put it through. Full, half, Olympic sprint. What if you're doing a half marathon, a full marathon in your off season, that stress immediately, now your body's been under, you need to start trying to compensate for that. So the minute you cross that finish line and you're celebrating, yay, you did it, that is when you need to take care of your body to get it recovered for what's to come. And so that will look like changing clothes as quickly as you can afterwards to get your body so that nothing's rubbing or hurting, and so you stay dry and healthy. It's going to look like getting something taken in, going to the food tent, something that your stomach can handle. More simple carbs after seem to do better than complex carbs when you cross a finish line. So you can have the pizza, you can have the stuff that's there, replenish your body, take that in. I'm a big fan of, if you have friends and family there that would have a protein bar ready for you or a smoothie right there. I know Natasha's talked about making sure she has a protein smoothie when she crosses the finish line to already start taking in the calories, the protein that she needs, starting already to get the fat stores back up, the carbohydrates back up. So getting something in you as well as hydration as quickly as possible to start that recovery process. And then I'm a big fan also of, once you get home, soaking in Epsom salts. You want to start giving those joints and tendons and muscles the recovery they need, while also bringing down the swelling. And the Epsom salts really seem to help speed along the recovery process. Then you wake up the next day, you're not quite as stiff and sore. So let's talk about the next day. So you finished, you're excited, you get home, you're eating, you soak, you're ready to go. You wake up the next morning. One thing I have told my athletes, Natasha has told me this, that day that you finish and you cross and you're excited, don't analyze your race. Like, don't worry about it. Just celebrate what you did. Thank the people who are at the finish line for you. And then let it soak in a little bit, how things went, how you felt. And then the days after the race, that's when we're looking, like during your recovery time, that's when you can start pulling up your data and looking and seeing the things you want to do different and the changes and what you hit and what you didn't hit. But really celebrate that first day after you finish. So the next day, when you're feeling better, sit down. Your emotions won't be so high. You won't be so tired. Sit down, make some pros and cons list of what happened on course, things that you would do different, things that you really enjoyed. Make sure you're talking with your coach about that as well. In terms of working out, especially if you're doing a half or a full, those first 3 days afterwards, you are just completely recovering. So you are taking care of your body and doing really what feels good. I'm a big fan of jumping in the pool, doing a couple hundreds, using the kickboard with fins just to get things moving, doing some good pulls. I don't want you just sitting on the couch. Things will seize up, things will keep swollen. Little bits of movement in terms of easy cycling, easy swimming, just keeps things going, will help break up what's tight. And then it will just really help aid in that recovery process. It'll help you sleep better. So just light workouts, I don't really call them workouts because there's not a lot of energy involved in it. It's just real mindful of how your body's feeling those first 3 days. You're also making sure you're eating enough, you're hydrating enough. You're, like I said, doing warm baths, cold baths, trying to bring down some of that swelling and the stress that you've put on your body from that race. So those are your first 3 days leading into that. Really, you're only looking at about 15 to 30 minutes of swimming or easy cycling those days just to keep the movement going. As we go further away, days 4 through 7, you can start to progress a little bit more on those workouts. You can start adding a little bit more in. Still, after a half or full, I'm not a big fan of, you're not running yet. There's not high impact. It's real low impact. It's real intentional on just healing the body during those days. So even days 4 to 7, you're still working on bringing down swelling and bringing and healing all the stress that you had already put on your body. You're doing that through food, through rest, and just through the light workouts that then can start to pick up on those days 4 through 7. And it really isn't until days 7 through 14 that the activity can pick up a little bit. You can add some light weights At that point, as long as your coach is okay with it, depending on the effort you put out on race day, right? So if you just did a full and you like really pushed it, then maybe by day 7, you're not ready yet. So you're listening to your body, you're listening to your coach. But if things are feeling good, that's on those days 7 through 14 that you can start slowly increasing the intensity of what you're doing in those workouts to get yourself ready, and constantly like, is this benefiting my recovery? That's what you're asking yourself through all of these workouts that you're putting in place. Days 14 and 21, that's when you can start adding back in the running, adding back in the intervals, checking the heart rate. How are you feeling? Are you feeling like you've recovered in terms of your hydration and your nutrition? Talking with your coach about what that looks like with multiple sports on a day at that point. And then slowly starting to build either into your next training block or into what we're kind of calling preseason, off season for what's to come. And then the other thing that I just want to encourage everybody to do as we are in this preseason and off season time is to go back and look at your Trainingpeaks account before the last race that you did. So look at those months leading up to your A race. What does that look like for how did you really do? Like, look at it with objective eyes. Is it mostly green? Great. Are there more reds than you really thought there were? So really be objective with what you're looking at in that Trainingpeaks account for how consistent that you were. The other thing is go back to those workouts. You're going to see similar workouts in your next builds, right? So go back to the workouts that you did well. And what did you do well with them? Were you fueled properly? Were you sleeping enough? Did you do it in the morning? Did you do it in the afternoon? Like, when was that done? Look at the workouts you missed. Why? Were you ill? Did you just not get them in? Do we need to talk about your schedule and changing things up so you can fit everything in, or pulling the load back a little bit? But this is where those comments that we love as coaches, because it helps us know what's going on for you, really pay off when we can go back. Hey, your race was in October, you killed it. How were things in July? What were you doing in July that made October so successful? And so we can look at those comments. So look at that training build that you did to lead up to that A race. What did you do well? What do you need to improve on for next race season? I need to be more consistent. I need to be more communicative with my coach. I need to be putting better comments in. There's always improvements we can make, and Trainingpeaks is a really good journal for you, for us moving forward. Like for Ironman Waco, I just went back and looked at a year ago what I was putting in, because I did Ironman Waco a year ago. I did it this year, and I went back and looked, what was I hitting? What was my heart rate in September versus my heart rate in September this year? And so because we have all that data, we can really then make all these races coming into the next year even that much more successful, whatever that looks like for you. So even like as we're looking to have all these goals for race season of what you want to do, and you want a podium and qualify for this, those are great. But in training, you need to have your goals as well. I want better comments. I want to track this stat better for myself. I want to have better communication. So make some of those training goals for yourself as well. So sit down during this off season and look at those training goals to then make it even a better race season for you moving into next year. So that's one really good time during recovery. Go back. You have the time right now. We're not doing the intensive work. Go look at what you did well. Make those notes so when you have a conversation with your coach, you're ready to go with, here's what I did that is great. Here's what I did that I need improvement on. And then that you can work through that together, getting ready for the next season. So anyway, just enjoy your recovery time and getting ready for the next race, whatever that looks like, or the race season. So that's one thing for me. I've rushed through recovery before, and every time I do that, I get injured or sick. So those have been like the biggest consequences for me when I rush through that recovery. So just really enjoy it. And then it's great to start that goal setting for next season. But that was really just what I've talked a lot with my athletes about that the last couple of weeks with recovery. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Harold, do you have anything to say about that?
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. I mean, this is an underappreciated, concept, right? It's a part of everybody's yearly race schedule, their development from year to year, but nobody really thinks about it, right? Is how aggressive, or what am I going to do to recover at the end of the year after all of my races? And it just kind of becomes a side note. A lot of times people don't focus on it, don't think about it too much. Or most of the time it coordinates with the holidays, and you got family stuff going on anyways, and things get chaotic. But a thoughtful kind of sit down for an hour or so to map out what your recovery after your last big race should look like is always a good idea, right? So yeah, I mean, that was perfect, Katie. Everything right there is spot on my side of it as well.
Great. Awesome. All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I think we're good for tonight. Natasha will be back next week, talking about off-season, preseason, and 2023 and what all of that looks like. So yeah, so I think that's it. But good luck to everyone doing Florida, and Arizona's right around the corner. So enjoy your taper and your last big pushes. Well done to everyone at World 7.3. We're so proud of all of you guys, and the efforts that were put out there were amazing. And I think it's going to be a really strong finish to 2022 for NVDM. It's just really encouraging. So I think that's it. All right. Well, y'all have a great night, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye.